The examination room door opened, and everything Walter Engstrom thought he knew about his life ended in a single breath. Marguerite. She stood frozen in the doorway. The patient file in her hands trembled once and then went still. 10 years had passed since he last saw her face. 10 years since he watched her walk out of their apartment and disappear so completely that no amount of money or investigators could find her. She had cut her hair. Silver threads now wove through the dark waves that once fell past her shoulders. She wore a white coat over simple clothing. A stethoscope draped around her neck like jewelry. The decade had not diminished her. If anything, it had refined her into something sharper and more formidable than the woman he remembered. Mr. Engstrom. Her voice carried no warmth. No recognition beyond the clinical. I see my office failed to note our prior acquaintance. I can refer you to a colleague if you prefer. Margo. Her name came out like a confession. Dr. Delacroix. She moved to her desk and sat with rigid precision. Your referral indicates persistent headaches and episodic confusion. How long have these symptoms been present? The question hung in the sterile air between them. She would not look at him. Her pen hovered over his file and her eyes remained fixed on paperwork as though he were any other patient. As though they had not shared a bed and a life and promises that were supposed to last forever. I do not want another doctor. That is not what I asked. Welcome back to another powerful story, my beloved listeners. Kindly tell where you are watching from and what time it is where you are at. If you are new here, prepare for a story of betrayal, unexpected love, and what truly makes a family. Drop everything and listen closely. This tale of heartbreak and redemption might just change how you view love and family forever. Walter sat in the patient chair and watched the woman he had once loved with everything he had reduce him to a file number and a list of symptoms. Her questions came steadily. Family history, prior conditions, medications, lifestyle factors. She examined him with impersonal efficiency. Reflexes, pupil response, coordination tests. Her hands were careful and clinical and utterly devoid of any recognition that they had once touched him with tenderness. When she finished, she returned to her desk and made notes in silence. I will order imaging. MRI with contrast. We will schedule follow-up once results are available. Margo, please. We need to talk. We need to do nothing except address your medical condition. She looked up and he flinched at the ice in her gaze. I am your physician today. Either you tell me about your symptoms, or I will refer you to one of my colleagues. Choose quickly. I have other patients waiting. The dismissal was complete. He had been processed through the machinery of her professionalism and stripped of all prior identity. He should have expected nothing else. The door burst open before he could respond. Mama, I finished the chapter and Mr. Brennan says I can have the good markers if you say it is okay and oh. A boy stopped mid-stride. He was perhaps 9 years old and carried a thick book under one arm. His school clothes were slightly rumpled from sitting too long. His hair was dark like his mother's. His chin was Walter's. His nose was Walter's. And his eyes. Those grey-blue eyes. The particular shade that relatives had always called Engstrom eyes passed through generations like an inheritance. Those eyes stared at Walter with open curiosity. Gabriel. Marguerite's voice cracked for the first time since she had entered the room. I told you to wait in the staff room. I know, but the chapter was about the brain and I wanted to tell you about the axons. The boy's gaze shifted between his mother and the stranger sitting in the patient chair. Is he a patient? Time crystallized into that single moment. Walter could not breathe. He could not think. He could not do anything except stare at this child who carried his face reconstructed in miniature. His gestures reflected back through decades of separation. The boy tilted his head exactly the way Walter did when studying a problem. A movement his own mother had photographed and catalogued and teased him about throughout his childhood. Gabriel, please wait outside. But, Mama. Now. The boy retreated and cast one final curious glance before the door closed behind him. The silence he left was suffocating. Walter's hands shook so badly he had to grip the arms of the chair to keep them still. His voice came out fractured and barely recognizable as his own. When? How? That is my son. Your imaging appointment will be scheduled by my office. You will receive a call within 48 hours. Marguerite gathered papers and stood and moved toward the door with the precision of someone escaping a burning building. I will have a colleague review your results. There is no need for us to meet again. That is my son. The statement hit the air like something thrown. Marguerite stopped with her hand on the doorframe. Her back remained turned. That is my son, and you never told me. She turned slowly. The mask had fallen. Beneath it lay 10 years of fury compressed into something cold and absolute. You lost the right to that word when you chose your lawyer's photographs over your wife's truth. Margo. Dr. Delacroix. Steel in every syllable. And you will not speak of him again. Not to me. Not to anyone. He does not know your name. He does not know you exist. And that is how it will remain. She left. The door closed with a soft click that sounded like a cell door locking. Walter sat alone in that examination room for 11 minutes before he could make his legs work well enough to stand. He walked through corridors that seemed to stretch forever. Past nurses who did not know his world had just collapsed. Past patients with ordinary problems and ordinary lives. He reached his car in the underground parking garage and sat behind the wheel without starting the engine. He had a son. A boy named Gabriel who read books about the brain and wanted good markers and had eyes exactly like his own. A boy who existed because Marguerite was pregnant when he threw her away. A boy she had raised alone for 10 years while Walter built companies and accumulated wealth and told himself the hole in his chest was ambition driving him forward rather than guilt pulling him under. His phone rang. His assistant. He did not answer. It rang again. A board member. He ignored it. The machinery of empire demanded attention, and he let it ring because nothing mattered now except the face of that child burned into his memory like a brand. The calculation was simple. Gabriel appeared to be 9 years old. 10 years ago, Walter had ended his marriage in the cruelest way possible. The timeline aligned perfectly with their last night together. The night after he threw the divorce papers at her. The night they had collided one final time in anger and grief, and something that felt like goodbye made physical. She had been pregnant. She had walked away carrying his child. And she had never told him. Part of him wanted to rage at the injustice of it. He had a right to know. He had a right to his own son. But a larger part of him understood exactly why she had done it. He remembered his own words from that night. The accusations. The certainty. The disgust in his voice when he told her to get out of his home. Why would she have trusted him with anything after that? Why would she have believed he would accept a child he probably would have assumed was not his? He started the car and drove home through streets that looked unfamiliar though he had traveled them for years. His penthouse occupied the top 3 floors of a building he had developed himself. The views stretched across the entire city. The furnishings had been selected by designers whose names he could not remember. Everything was expensive and immaculate and empty. Walter poured himself a drink he did not taste. He sat at the window and watched the sun set over a city that had made him wealthy beyond imagination and left him with nothing that mattered. Somewhere in this city his son was doing homework or eating dinner or asking his mother questions about the stranger in her office. Somewhere Marguerite was answering those questions with careful half-truths designed to protect the boy from a father who could not be trusted. And she was right. That was the part that destroyed him. She was absolutely right not to trust him. The memories came whether he wanted them or not. They arrived like ghosts summoned by the sight of that child, and they would not be dismissed. 10 years ago, Walter Engström was 43 years old and building an empire. His company had grown from a basement prototype into something worth hundreds of millions. Expansion was coming. International markets were opening. He worked 18-hour days and came home to a wife who was working nearly as hard. Marguerite was a neurology resident then. 28 years old. Brilliant in ways that intimidated him. Beautiful in ways that made him feel like the luckiest man alive. They had met at a fundraiser for the hospital where she was training. He had been captivated by the way she argued with a donor twice her age about research funding. She had been captivated by his willingness to listen and learn. Their courtship was swift. Their wedding was small. Their first year was happy despite the impossible schedules they both maintained. But somewhere in the second year the distance began to grow. Walter traveled constantly. Marguerite worked shifts that lasted days. They communicated through notes left on the kitchen counter and voicemails that arrived hours after they were sent. He knew she was unhappy. He could see it in the way she looked at him during the rare dinners they shared. But he told himself it was temporary. Once the company was established. Once her residency ended. Once they had time. He never made time. And in the absence of attention his doubts began to grow. Marguerite was young. Marguerite was brilliant. Marguerite was surrounded by colleagues who shared her passion for medicine while Walter talked about market penetration and profit margins. She would leave him eventually. He was certain of it. The only question was when. When his lawyer Harrison Cole arrived at the apartment with a manila envelope, Walter felt something like relief beneath the shock. The photographs were damning. Marguerite at a restaurant with executives from a rival technology company. Marguerite passing documents across a table. Marguerite in what appeared to be intimate conversation with men he did not recognize. She is selling your research. Harrison's voice was grave. The investigator has been tracking her for 3 weeks. These meetings have been happening regularly. That is impossible. I wish it were. Harrison spread more photographs across the dining table. The men she is meeting with are executives at Thornton Industries. Your direct competitor. Whatever she has been giving them has allowed them to anticipate your moves for months. The failed acquisition last quarter. The contract you lost in Singapore. It all traces back to leaked information. Walter stared at the photographs. His wife's face smiled up at him from a dozen different angles. She looked happy in these images. Animated. Engaged. The way she used to look at him before the distance grew too wide. Marguerite came home 3 hours later. She looked exhausted from a shift that had stretched past 20 hours. Her coat was wrinkled. Her hair was falling from its pins. She smiled when she saw him, and the smile faded when she saw what was spread across the table. What is this? You tell me. Walter. I do not understand. Those are photographs of me, but I do not. I know what you have been doing. He heard his own voice as though from a great distance. Cold and controlled and absolutely certain. Meeting with Thornton Industries. Selling them information about my company. How long has this been going on? What? That is insane. Those are professional conferences. Job interviews. I have been looking for positions because you are never here and I need something that. Job interviews. He laughed and the sound was bitter and broken. With my direct competitor. With the same company that has been anticipating every move I make for the past year. Walter, please listen to me. I have listened enough. He picked up the envelope and threw it at her feet. Photographs scattered across the floor. My lawyer has documented everything. Corporate espionage. Betrayal of confidential information. I could have you prosecuted, but I would rather just be done with you. Marguerite's face cycled through confusion to recognition to something that looked like devastation. She understood now what he thought she was. She understood what he believed. Those photographs are not what you think. Her voice shook. Yes, I met with people from other companies. I was interviewing for positions. I was trying to build a career because my husband is never present and I need something beyond waiting for him to come home. With my competitors. I am a neurologist. They have research departments. Medical technology divisions. I was not selling anything. I do not even have access to your confidential information. The timeline says otherwise. What timeline? What are you talking about? Every meeting documented here corresponds with a leak of sensitive information. He pointed to dates scrawled on the back of photographs. My lawyer has done the research. The pattern is clear. Your lawyer. Marguerite stared at him. You hired investigators to follow me. You built a case against me. And you never once thought to simply ask. Would you have told me the truth? The truth. The truth is that I love you. The truth is that I have been miserable and lonely and trying to find meaning in a marriage where my husband treats me like furniture. The truth is that those meetings were me trying to have a life beyond waiting for you. Walter wanted to believe her. Some part of him recognized the sincerity in her voice. But a larger part had already made its decision. The evidence was clear. The pattern was obvious. And beneath all of it was the relief he did not want to examine. The relief of having an excuse to end something that required more work than he wanted to give. I want a divorce. The words landed like physical blows. Marguerite staggered backward and caught herself on the edge of the table. Walter. I have had the papers drawn up. He gestured to a folder that sat beside the scattered photographs. Sign them. Take whatever money you need to start over. But I want you out of this apartment tonight. You cannot be serious. I have never been more serious about anything. Marguerite picked up the folder with shaking hands. She opened it and read the first page and the second. Her face was pale and her eyes were bright with tears she refused to shed. I am your wife. We made vows. Vows you broke when you sold me out to my competitors. I did not do that. The evidence says otherwise. Evidence can be manufactured. Walter, please. Look at me. She stepped toward him and he stepped back. I swear to you on everything I have ever believed in that I did not betray you. Those meetings were innocent. Someone has fabricated this case against me. Who? His voice was cold. Who would do that? I do not know. Someone who wants us separated. Someone who has access to investigators and resources and... You sound paranoid. I sound like someone whose husband has just accused her of corporate espionage based on photographs and circumstantial timing. Sign the papers, Marguerite. No. Then I will have my lawyers make this much more difficult than it needs to be. They stared at each other across a distance that had nothing to do with the physical space between them. Walter saw the woman he had married. The brilliant, beautiful woman who had argued with donors and laughed at his jokes and made him feel like perhaps he was not as empty as he feared. That woman was still there. Still looking at him with love that was transforming rapidly into something else. If I sign these papers. Her voice was steady now. If I give you this divorce. I walk away with nothing. Take whatever you want. I do not care. I do not want your money. I want you to believe me. I cannot or will not. Both. The silence stretched between them. Outside the windows, the city glittered with lights that did not know or care that a marriage was dying in this room. Fine. Marguerite set down the folder. Give me a pen. Walter handed her one from his pocket. She sat at the table and signed each page with handwriting that grew steadier as she went. Each signature was a door closing. Each initialed clause was a promise unmade. When she finished, she stood and dropped the pen on top of the papers. I will be gone within the hour. Good. But, Walter. She paused at the doorway to the bedroom they had shared. When you realize what you have done. When you understand how wrong you were. Do not come looking for me. Some broken things cannot be fixed. She went to pack. Walter sat at the table surrounded by photographs and legal documents, and listened to the sounds of his marriage being dismantled. Drawers opening. Closet doors sliding. A suitcase being filled with the fragments of a life together. She emerged 40 minutes later with a single bag over her shoulder. Her face was composed. Her eyes were dry. She had clearly been crying, but she would not let him see the evidence. Key. He said. She placed it on the counter with a click that sounded final. Goodbye, Walter. Goodbye. She walked out and closed the door behind her. He listened to her footsteps recede down the hallway. He heard the elevator arrive and depart. And then there was only silence. He poured himself a drink. He sat at the window. He told himself he had done the right thing. The evidence was clear. The betrayal was documented. He was protecting himself and his company from a woman who had used him. But something nagged at him even then. The photographs were almost too perfect. The timing too convenient. And the look on her face when she denied everything. The absolute sincerity in her voice. He pushed the doubts away. He finished his drink and poured another. He did not sleep that night or the night after. 3 months later the divorce was final. Marguerite had requested nothing in the settlement. No alimony. No share of his growing fortune. She simply signed what needed signing and disappeared. Her phone was disconnected. Her apartment was vacated. Her residency program reported that she had transferred to another hospital but would not say where. Walter told himself it was proof of her guilt. Innocent people fought. Guilty people fled. He did not know she was carrying his child when she walked out the door. He did not know she had taken an ultrasound image to that final confrontation planning to surprise him with news that should have changed everything. He did not know she had kept the news buried rather than share it with a man who looked at her with disgust and accused her of things she had never done. She disappeared because she was protecting someone who did not exist yet. A child she somehow knew would have his father's eyes. A child who deserved better than growing up in a house where trust had been murdered by manufactured evidence and willing suspicion. The years passed. Walter's company grew. The technology sector expanded and Engstrom Industries expanded with it. By the time the decade mark arrived, Walter was worth $4 billion. He owned properties on 3 continents. He sat on boards and advised governments and was featured in magazines as an example of entrepreneurial success. He was also completely alone. He never remarried. He dated occasionally, but the relationships never lasted beyond a few months. Every woman he met was measured against Marguerite and found wanting. Not because they were inadequate, but because they were not her. The specific way she laughed at his terrible jokes. The way she fell asleep reading medical journals. The way she looked at him in the early days like he was the most interesting person she had ever met. He searched for her periodically during the first years. Private investigators who found nothing. Database searches that yielded no results. She had changed her name back to her maiden identity and buried herself so completely that finding her would have required more resources than he was willing to commit. Eventually he stopped searching. The guilt transformed into something calcified. A stone he carried in his chest without examining. His mother died 2 years after the divorce. His father followed 18 months later. His business partner from the early days retired and moved to another country. One by one, the people who remembered who he had been before the success disappeared from his life. He was left with employees and board members and the occasional journalist who wanted to understand how a man could build something worth billions from nothing. He never told them the truth. That he had started building the empire to impress a woman. That he had kept building it because there was nothing else left. That every accomplishment felt hollow because there was no one to share it with. The headaches began around his 50th birthday. Pressure behind his eyes that would not dissipate. Moments of confusion that frightened him more than he would admit. He ignored them for months because he had ignored everything personal for years. His body was just another system to be managed. Another problem to be solved. Finally, his personal physician insisted. The symptoms could indicate something serious. He needed to see a specialist. A neurologist. Someone who could run tests and rule out possibilities that neither of them wanted to name. His assistant scheduled the appointment. Dr. M. Delacroix. Department of Neurology. Langford Medical Center. The name meant nothing to her because the marriage was ancient history that Walter never discussed. She did not know that M stood for Marguerite. She did not know that Walter sat in the parking garage for 11 minutes before the appointment because some part of him recognized what was coming. And now here he was. Sitting in his empty penthouse with a glass of whiskey he could not taste. Watching the city lights blur through eyes that would not stop leaking. He had a son. A boy who would turn 10 years old without knowing his father existed. A boy whose mother had built an entire life specifically to keep Walter away. A boy who represented everything he had thrown away because he was too weak to trust the woman he claimed to love. The investigation files were still in his lawyer's office. Harrison Cole had moved into estate planning years ago, but he kept meticulous records. Walter could request the documents. He could examine the photographs again with fresh eyes. He could look for the cracks that had nagged at him a decade ago and that he had been too eager to ignore. But what would that change? Even if the evidence was manufactured. Even if Marguerite had been completely innocent. He had chosen to believe lies because they were easier than truth. He had welcomed the excuse to end a marriage that required more work than he wanted to give. The person who commissioned the fabrication was secondary to the person who accepted it without question. That person was him. That failure was his. And no amount of money or regret could undo what he had done. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Stop sitting in hospital parking lots. If I see you again, I will call the police. He stared at the message for a long time. Then he typed back. I just want to understand. Please. The response came 12 minutes later. There is nothing to understand. You made your choice. Live with it. Walter set down the phone. He finished his drink. He went to bed knowing he would not sleep. In a small apartment across the city, Marguerite Delacroix stood at her kitchen window and watched the same city lights Walter was watching. Gabriel was asleep in his room surrounded by books about the brain and sketches of neurons. He had asked about the man in her office. The man with eyes like his. She had deflected. Told him the patient had recognized her from a conference. Told him the awkwardness was nothing important. Told him everything except the truth. But Gabriel was too smart. He had always been too smart. He would research and question and eventually piece together the puzzle she had spent 10 years hiding. The box was in her closet. The one she never opened except on the hardest nights. Inside were photographs from her wedding. Letters Walter had written during their courtship. The ultrasound image she had been carrying the night everything ended. She did not open it tonight. She already knew what was inside and what it would cost her to look at it. The memories were sufficient torture without physical evidence. She had loved him. That was the cruelest part. She had loved him completely and stupidly and with all the naive faith of a woman who believed love was enough. She had loved him through the long hours and the missed dinners and the growing distance. She had loved him even as she interviewed for other positions because she needed something beyond waiting for a man who was never there. And he had thrown it all away. Not because she had done something wrong but because believing lies was easier than believing her. The pregnancy was discovered 2 weeks after she left. She was already in another state by then. Already reconstructing herself into someone new. The positive test was a complication she had not anticipated and then a gift she had not known she needed. Gabriel gave her purpose beyond survival. Gabriel gave her something to protect. Gabriel gave her a reason to become the woman she had never known she could be. She raised him alone. Through residency and fellowship and the long climb to the position she now held. Through sleepless nights and impossible schedules and the constant weight of being the only parent. She had done it because there was no other option. Because the man who should have been there had chosen suspicion over faith. And now he was back. Sitting in her examination room with his headaches and his regret and his claims of wanting to understand. She did not believe him. She had stopped believing in Walter Engstrom a decade ago and she had no intention of starting again. He could hire lawyers and make threats and throw money at the problem. She had documentation of 10 years of single parenting. She had records of every milestone reached without his involvement. No court in the world would grant him access to a child he had abandoned before birth. But Gabriel was asking questions. Gabriel had seen the stranger with matching eyes. Gabriel was too smart to accept her deflections forever. The reckoning was coming. She could feel it gathering like a storm on the horizon. Everything she had built to protect her son from disappointment was about to be tested. She went to bed without sleeping. In the morning she would go to work and see patients and pretend that nothing had changed. She would sign off on Walter's test results without looking at them. She would refer him to a colleague and close the door on whatever pathetic reconciliation he was hoping for. And when Gabriel asked his questions again, she would find a way to answer them without destroying the peace they had built together. Some broken things cannot be fixed. She had told Walter that a decade ago and she still believed it. The weeks that followed were a careful negotiation between what Walter wanted and what Marguerite would allow. He stopped parking outside her clinic. He stopped the amateur surveillance that had prompted her warning. But he did not stop thinking about Gabriel. He could not stop thinking about Gabriel. The boy's face haunted his dreams. Those grey-blue eyes looking at him with curiosity and without recognition. The way he tilted his head. The way he carried that book like it contained secrets too important to set aside. Every gesture was familiar. Every expression was an echo of something Walter saw in his own mirror. He established a trust fund. Anonymous contributions that would be available to Gabriel when he turned 18 regardless of whether Walter was ever allowed into his life. He wrote a letter explaining everything. His failures. His regret. His hope that someday the boy might understand what his father could not forgive in himself. He gave the letter to his lawyer with instructions for delivery if anything ever happened to him. And then he tried to wait. Waiting had never been his strength. He had built an empire through relentless action. Problems were solved by application of resources and willpower. Obstacles were overcome through determination and force. But this was different. This was a woman who owed him nothing and a child who did not know he existed. No amount of money could purchase what he wanted. No amount of determination could force a door that Marguerite had locked against him. He requested a meeting through formal channels. Patient follow-up. Medical questions requiring clarification. Marguerite refused. He requested again. Refused again. On his third attempt she agreed to 15 minutes. Medical discussion only. He arrived at her office with arguments prepared and watched them evaporate the moment he saw her face. She looked exhausted. Dark circles beneath her eyes. Tension in her shoulders. Something was wrong and he could not ask what because they were no longer people who shared concerns. I want to meet him. The words came out before he could stop them. Gabriel. Our son. No. Margo, please. You do not have the right to ask me for anything. You have never had that right. She sat behind her desk like a queen defending territory. I raised him alone. Through midnight fevers and first days of school and every question about why he does not have what other children have. I did that. Not you. And I will not let you disrupt the life I built because you suddenly feel remorse. He deserves to know his father. He deserves a father who would have believed his mother. Who would have fought for his family instead of discarding them. She stood and he realized the meeting was already ending. You are not that man. You never were. I could become him. Give me the chance to prove. No. Final and absolute. This conversation is over. Do not contact my office again. She left before he could respond. He sat in the empty room and listened to the silence and knew that he had failed again. The weeks continued to pass. Walter stepped back from his company. His attention had fragmented beyond repair. Board members expressed concern. His assistant rescheduled meetings he forgot entirely. The empire he had built felt suddenly irrelevant. A monument constructed to fill emptiness that only widened as the walls rose higher. He began sending flowers. Not roses. Carnations. The flower associated with Gabriel's birth month. He had looked it up. He sent them weekly. No notes. No demands. Just the flower. Marguerite threw the first one away. She threw the second and the third. But her secretary reported that the fourth had been placed in a vase on her desk before being moved to a cabinet. Something was shifting. The wall was not crumbling, but it was perhaps developing cracks. And then the phone call came. Harrison Cole. His lawyer from the divorce. A man Walter had not spoken to in years. His voice carried the particular hesitation of someone delivering news they dreaded. I thought you should know. Before you hear it somewhere else. Walter waited. The evidence I presented during your divorce proceedings. The photographs. The documentation. Harrison paused. It was fabricated. All of it. The words entered Walter's consciousness slowly. Like water seeping through stone. I received a confession this week. From an old colleague who passed away recently. He left instructions for disclosure. The material was commissioned by one of your early investors. Victor Ashworth. He wanted your marriage dissolved before you expanded internationally. He saw your wife as a liability. Walter said nothing. He could not speak. He could not breathe. Ashworth hired professionals to stage the photographs. To manufacture the timeline. To create a case convincing enough that you would believe it without question. Harrison's voice broke. I apologize for my role in this. I should have verified independently. I accepted the evidence because it looked solid and I wanted to be helpful. I was wrong. Walter disconnected the call without responding. He sat in his study for hours as evening turned to full dark. The confession changed nothing and everything. He had suspected for years. The photographs were too convenient. The evidence too clean. The pattern too perfect. But he had chosen to believe because believing was easier than the alternative. Trusting Marguerite required courage he did not possess. Accepting the manufactured evidence required only cowardice. Victor Ashworth was dead. Harrison Cole was guilty of negligence but not malice. The only person who bore full responsibility for what happened was Walter himself. He had destroyed an innocent woman because he was looking for an excuse to leave. The understanding settled over him like a shroud. He had told himself for 10 years that he was the victim of betrayal. That his suspicion was justified. That the evidence spoke for itself. But the evidence was a lie commissioned by a man who saw profit in destruction. And Walter had embraced that lie because it gave him permission to do what he already wanted. End a marriage that required work he did not want to do. Abandon a woman who deserved better than he could give. Protect himself from the vulnerability of loving someone who might eventually leave. The cruelest part was that Marguerite had not been planning to leave. She had been planning to tell him about the pregnancy. She had been planning to recommit to a marriage that was struggling. She had been planning to fight for them. And he had not given her the chance. Across the city, Marguerite received the same disclosure documents. They arrived in her office mail. Official legal correspondence. A dead man's confession forwarded through lawyers who were closing files. She read the fabrication report. The investor's instructions to the private investigator. The payments documented. The staging described in clinical detail. Each photograph broken down into its manufactured components. Her reaction was not relief. It was fury. She had never needed documentation to know she was innocent. She had told Walter the truth to his face, and he had chosen not to believe her. These papers only confirmed what she had said a decade ago in their apartment while he stared at her with disgust. The evidence changes nothing. She told the documents as though they could hear her. He still chose to believe lies instead of trusting me. That night Gabriel found her crying over the papers. He stood in the doorway of her bedroom in his pajamas and watched her for a long moment before speaking. "What are those, Mama?" She wiped her face and put the papers away. "Nothing important. Just old documents from a long time ago." "You are crying." "I am just tired." "You cry about my father sometimes. I can hear you even though you think I am asleep." Marguerite froze. Gabriel had never spoken about this before. She had assumed he accepted her careful explanations. She had assumed the deflections were working. "I know who he is." Gabriel continued. "The man from your office. The one with eyes like mine. His name is Walter Engstrom. I looked him up." "Gabriel. He is a billionaire. He built a company. There are lots of articles about him, but none of them mention a family." The boy moved to sit beside her on the bed. "Why did he leave? Why does he not know about me?" The question she had dreaded for 9 years finally arriving. And she was too exhausted and too raw to offer anything except the truth. "He did not leave. I left. Because he accused me of something terrible that I did not do. And I decided you deserved better than a father who could not trust your mother." Gabriel processed this with the seriousness that characterized everything he did. The papers say he was tricked. Someone lied to him. He chose to believe the lies. He chose suspicion over faith. People make mistakes. Gabriel's voice was small but certain. "You always say that. Do you not believe it?" "I believe it. But some mistakes have consequences that cannot be undone." "But he knows about me now. I saw his face in your office. He recognized me. He wants to know me." Marguerite closed her eyes. Her son was too smart. Too perceptive. Too determined to find answers to questions she wanted to leave buried. "Maybe he does. But wanting something does not mean you deserve it. He hurt me, Gabriel. Badly. And I spent 10 years making sure he could never hurt you the same way. But what if he has changed? What if he is sorry? Sorry does not fix the years I raised you alone. Sorry does not give you back the father you should have had. Sorry is just a word." Gabriel was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was barely a whisper. "I have his eyes, Mama. Everyone can see it. Do I not get to decide if I want to know where they came from?" The question broke something in Marguerite's carefully constructed walls. She pulled her son close and held him while tears fell into his hair. "I do not know," she admitted. "I do not know what the right thing is anymore." They sat together in the darkness. Mother and son. The weight of a decade of secrets finally shared. And across the city Walter Engstrom sat in his own darkness, staring at the disclosure documents, understanding for the first time the full scope of what he had done. He had destroyed an innocent woman. He had lost a son he never knew existed. He had built an empire worth billions, and it meant nothing. Nothing at all. The morning after Gabriel's confession, Marguerite stood at her kitchen counter and watched her son eat breakfast. He moved through his routine with the same careful precision he brought to everything. Cereal measured into bowl. Milk poured to exactly the right level. Spoon held properly. Book propped against the sugar jar so he could read while he ate. He had his father's habits. She had always known this, but now the knowledge carried weight it had not carried before. Every gesture was inherited from a man Gabriel had never met. Every expression was an echo of someone whose absence had shaped their entire lives. Mama. Gabriel did not look up from his book. I have been thinking. About what? About what you said last night. About mistakes and consequences. He turned a page with deliberate care. You tell your patients that brains can rewire themselves after damage. That the neural pathways can find new routes when old ones are blocked. That is different. Is it? He looked up now, and his grey-blue eyes held the particular intensity that always reminded her of Walter at his most focused. You always say the brain is the most adaptable organ in the body. That it can recover from things that should be permanent. Why would families be different? Marguerite set down her coffee cup. She did not have an answer that would satisfy him. She did not have an answer that satisfied herself. I'm not saying we have to be a family. Gabriel continued. I am saying I want to meet him. Just once. Just to see if my eyes really came from him and if he is as sad as he looked in your office. He looked sad to you. He looked like someone who lost something important and just realized it was gone. The observation was too perceptive for a 9-year-old. But Gabriel had always seen things other children missed. He noticed patterns and connections and emotional undercurrents that adults tried to hide. It was a gift that made him remarkable and a burden that made him lonely. I will think about it. Marguerite finally said. That is what you say when you mean no. That is what I say when I mean I need time. Gabriel nodded slowly. He returned to his book, but she could see he was not really reading. His mind was elsewhere. Calculating. Planning. Preparing arguments she would eventually have to address. She drove him to school in silence. Watched him walk through the front doors with his backpack and his book and his questions about a father he had never known. Then she drove to the hospital and sat in the parking garage for 11 minutes before she could make herself go inside. The carnation was waiting on her desk when she arrived. This week's flower in its usual spot. No note. No demand. Just the persistent reminder that Walter Engström had not given up. She picked it up and studied the petals. Pink tinged with white. The exact shade of the blanket Gabriel had been wrapped in when she brought him home from the hospital. She wondered if that was intentional. She wondered if Walter had researched such details the way he researched everything else. She put the flower in water and got to work. The days passed with the particular heaviness of unresolved things. Gabriel did not bring up his father again, but she could feel the questions accumulating behind his silence. He was building a case. Gathering evidence. Preparing for a conversation she was not ready to have. Walter maintained his distance. No more parking lot surveillance. No more formal meeting requests through her office. Just the weekly flower and the silence that somehow felt louder than any demand. She found herself thinking about him at odd moments. During surgery, when her hands moved through procedures she could perform in her sleep. During consultations, when patients described symptoms that reminded her of his headaches. During the long drives home when the city lights blurred past and exhaustion made her defenses weak. She had loved him once. That was the part she could not escape no matter how hard she tried. She had loved him with the complete and terrifying vulnerability of someone who believed love was enough to overcome anything. And he had taken that love and crushed it with manufactured evidence and willing suspicion. But Gabriel was right. People made mistakes. Brains rewired themselves. Neural pathways found new routes when old ones were blocked. The question was whether she believed that applied to hearts as well. 2 weeks after their midnight conversation, Gabriel came to her with a proposal. I want to write him a letter. Marguerite looked up from the patient files she was reviewing at the kitchen table. Gabriel stood in the doorway with a notebook in his hands and determination in his eyes. What kind of letter? A letter introducing myself. Explaining who I am and what I want to know. He moved closer and set the notebook on the table. I have already drafted it. Do you want to read it? She should have said no. She should have shut down this line of inquiry before it went any further. But Gabriel was looking at her with such hope and such carefully contained fear that she could not refuse. The letter was 3 pages long. Written in his precise handwriting with occasional crossed-out words where he had changed his mind. Dear Mr. Engström, I know you are my biological father. I have known for several weeks now. I found photographs in my mother's closet and I researched your name online. I look like you. We have the same eyes and the same chin and the same way of tilting our heads when we are thinking. I am 9 years old. I like science, especially neurology, because that is what my mother does. I read a lot. I am good at math but not very good at sports. I do not have many friends because other children think I am strange. I do not think I am strange. I think I am just different. My mother told me you made a mistake a long time ago. She told me you believed something false about her and that is why you are not in my life. I understand that mistakes have consequences. I also understand that people can change. My mother teaches me that brains are adaptable. That damage can be repaired if you give the system time and the right conditions. I would like to know if you have changed. I would like to know if you think about me. I would like to know if you are sorry not just for what you did to my mother but for all the years you missed with me. I am not asking you to be my father. I already have a mother who is both parents to me. I am asking you to be someone I can know. Someone who can answer questions about where I came from. Someone who might understand why I am the way I am. If you want to meet me, please write back. If you do not want to meet me, please write back anyway so I know. Waiting without answers is harder than knowing the truth. Sincerely, Gabriel Delacroix. Marguerite read the letter 3 times. Each reading broke something new inside her chest. Her son had written to a stranger asking to be known. Her son had articulated with devastating clarity the loneliness of growing up without a father. Her son had done what she could not bring herself to do. He had opened a door she had spent 10 years keeping locked. This is very well written. She finally managed. Thank you. Will you send it for me? Gabriel, I do not know if this is a good idea. I know you do not. That is why I am asking you to trust me instead of protecting me. The words landed like a physical blow. Trust. The thing she had lost. The thing she had been denied. The thing she was now being asked to extend to a 9-year-old who wanted to know his father. What if he disappoints you? What if he is not what you hope? Then I will know. Gabriel's voice was steady. And knowing is better than wondering. Marguerite stared at her son. This boy who had her stubbornness and Walter's analytical mind. This child who saw the world with clarity that sometimes frightened her. This person she had created and raised and protected from every threat she could identify. She could not protect him from this. She could only walk beside him while he discovered for himself whether Walter Engstrom was worth knowing. I will send it. She heard herself say. But I have conditions. Gabriel's face lit up. What conditions? If he responds and wants to meet you, it will be supervised. I will be present for any interaction. And if at any point you feel uncomfortable or want to leave, we leave immediately. No questions. No guilt. Agreed. And Gabriel. She reached across the table and took his hand. If he hurts you. If he disappoints you. If he proves that he has not changed. I need you to tell me. I need you to let me help you process whatever happens. I will, Mama. Gabriel squeezed her hand. Thank you for trusting me. She did not trust him. She did not trust Walter. She did not trust herself. But she loved her son enough to let him try. The letter was sent the following day. Marguerite addressed it herself. Used the hospital as the return address. Included no note of her own. Just Gabriel's words in Gabriel's handwriting delivered to Walter Engstrom's corporate office. And then they waited. Walter received the letter on a Thursday afternoon. His assistant brought it in with the rest of his mail. Marked it as personal correspondence. Left it on his desk without comment. He recognized the hospital name on the return address. His hands shook as he opened the envelope. His vision blurred as he read the first line. Dear Mr. Engstrom. I know you are my biological father. He read the letter 7 times. Each reading revealed new details he had missed. The precision of the handwriting. The sophistication of the vocabulary. The emotional intelligence that allowed a 9-year-old to articulate such complex feelings. I do not have many friends because other children think I am strange. I do not think I am strange. I think I am just different. Walter remembered being that child. The one who read too much. The one who asked questions other children did not think to ask. The one who learned early that being smart often meant being alone. His son was like him, in ways that went beyond eye color and chin shape. Gabriel carried the particular burden of exceptional intelligence. The loneliness of seeing things others missed. The isolation of being different in a world that valued conformity. And Walter had not been there to help him navigate any of it. He called his assistant and cancelled his afternoon meetings. Then he sat at his desk and wrote a response. Dear Gabriel, thank you for your letter. It is the most important thing anyone has ever written to me. I have thought about you every day since I learned you existed. I have wondered what you were like, what you enjoyed, whether you were happy, whether you ever thought about me. I am sorry for the years I missed. I am sorry that my mistakes cost you a father. I am sorry that your mother had to be both parents because I was not strong enough to trust her. You asked if I have changed. I do not know how to answer that honestly. I am not the same man I was 10 years ago. Time and regret have altered me in ways I am still discovering. But I cannot promise that I am the person you deserve. I can only promise that I want to try. Yes, I want to meet you. More than I have ever wanted anything. I will accept whatever conditions your mother sets. I will move at whatever pace she requires. I will do whatever it takes to earn the chance to know you. You said waiting without answers is harder than knowing the truth. You are wiser than most adults I have met. The truth is that I love you already. I have loved you since the moment I saw you in your mother's office. Not because you are my biological child, but because you are remarkable. The truth is that I am terrified of disappointing you. I have disappointed everyone who ever mattered to me. I do not want to add you to that list. The truth is that I do not know if I can be what you need. But I am willing to spend the rest of my life trying to find out. Please tell your mother that I will wait. For as long as it takes. For whatever she needs. I am not going anywhere. With hope. Walter. He sent the letter the same day. Then he sat in his office and stared at the wall and tried to remember how to breathe. Gabriel received the response 3 days later. He read it at the kitchen table while Marguerite watched. His face remained composed, but his hands trembled slightly as he turned the pages. He loves me, Gabriel said when he finished. He says he loves me already. Marguerite took the letter and read it herself. Walter's handwriting had not changed. The same precise strokes she remembered from the notes he used to leave on their kitchen counter. The same careful formation of letters that revealed his engineering mind. But the words were different. Vulnerable in a way she had never seen from him. Honest in a way that cost something to produce. This was not the Walter who had accused her of betrayal. This was someone else. Someone broken and rebuilt into a shape she did not recognize. He says he will accept your conditions. Gabriel pointed to the relevant passage. He says he will wait as long as you need. I see that. Does this mean we can meet him? Marguerite set down the letter. Her son was looking at her with such hope. Such carefully contained excitement. She could crush it with a word. She could protect him from potential disappointment by simply saying no. But Gabriel had asked to be trusted instead of protected. And she had agreed. I will contact him, she said. We will set up a meeting. But remember what I said, Gabriel. If at any point you want to leave. I know, Mama. I remember. She texted Walter that night from an unknown number. The message was brief and practical. Gabriel wants to meet you. Saturday. Riverside Park. 10 in the morning. I will be present the entire time. 1 hour maximum. Do not bring gifts. Do not make promises you cannot keep. His response came within minutes. Thank you. I will be there. I will follow every rule. Thank you. She did not respond. She put down her phone and went to check on Gabriel. He was already asleep. Dreaming about whatever 9-year-olds dreamed about. Fathers perhaps. Families. The possibility of being known by someone who shared his eyes. She watched him for a long time. Then she went to her room and opened the box in her closet. The one she never touched except on the hardest nights. Walter's wedding ring was still inside. He had left it on the counter next to her key. She had taken it without knowing why. Kept it without examining the impulse. It sat now beside the ultrasound image and the wedding photographs and all the evidence of a life that had ended a decade ago. She picked up the ring and turned it in her fingers. The inscription was still visible inside the band. The words he had chosen when they exchanged vows. All my trust. The irony was too bitter to acknowledge. She put the ring back in the box, closed the lid, returned it to the shelf. Saturday would come. The meeting would happen. And whatever followed would reshape all of their lives in ways she could not predict. She went to bed and did not sleep. Saturday morning arrived with autumn sunshine too bright for the weight in Walter's chest. He reached the park an hour early, sat on the designated bench, checked his watch every 30 seconds. He had dressed carefully, casual but not too casual, approachable but not desperate. He had rehearsed conversations in his head, prepared answers to questions Gabriel might ask, practiced appearing calm when everything inside him was screaming. A car pulled into the parking lot at precisely 10 o'clock. Through the windshield he could see them. Marguerite in the driver's seat. Gabriel beside her. They appeared to be having a conversation. Then Gabriel nodded, opened his door, stepped out into the sunshine. He walked toward Walter with careful steps. His mother followed a few paces behind, close enough to intervene if needed, far enough to give the illusion of privacy. Gabriel stopped in front of the bench. Those grey-blue eyes studied Walter with scientific precision, taking measurements, noting details, building a mental model of the man who had contributed half his genetic material. "Hello," Gabriel said. "You look like me." Walter stood. His legs were unsteady, but he forced them to hold his weight. "Hello. You look like me." Gabriel tilted his head. The exact gesture Walter made when considering a problem. "Your letter said you were terrified of disappointing me. Are you still terrified?" "Yes." "Good." Gabriel nodded once. "That means you care. People who do not care are never terrified." Marguerite moved closer. Her face was carefully neutral, but Walter could see the tension in her shoulders, the readiness to end this at any moment. "I am Marguerite," she said, as if they were meeting for the first time. "Gabriel's mother. I know who you are." Walter kept his voice steady. "Thank you for allowing this." "I did not allow it. Gabriel asked for it. I simply did not refuse." The distinction was clear. She was not granting permission. She was not extending forgiveness. She was stepping aside because her son had requested something she could not justify denying. "Can we walk?" Gabriel asked. "Sitting makes me nervous." They walked. The path wound through the park past playgrounds and picnic areas and other families enjoying the autumn morning. Gabriel positioned himself between his parents. Marguerite on his left, Walter on his right. A family in formation if not in truth. "Tell me about yourself," Gabriel said. "The articles online only describe your work. I want to know other things." "What kind of things? What do you like to read? What music do you listen to? Do you have any pets? What is your favorite food? Do you believe in God?" Walter smiled despite himself. His son asked questions the way he did. Rapid fire. Comprehensive. Designed to extract maximum information in minimum time. "I read mostly non-fiction. History and science and biography. I listen to classical music when I am working and jazz when I am not. I do not have any pets. My favorite food is the pasta my mother used to make before she died. And I used to believe in God. Now I am not sure." "Why are you not sure?" "Because I have seen too many good people suffer while terrible people prosper. It makes me question whether there is any justice in the universe." Gabriel considered this. "My mother says justice is something humans create, not something that exists naturally." "Your mother is probably right about that. She is usually right about most things." Gabriel looked up at him. "Except when she is too stubborn to see what is in front of her." Marguerite made a small sound but did not interrupt. "Can I ask you something personal?" Gabriel continued. "Anything. Why did you believe those photographs? The ones that were fabricated. My mother said you chose suspicion over trust. I want to understand why." Walter stopped walking. This was the question he had dreaded. The one he had rehearsed answers for. But none of his prepared responses felt adequate. Because I was afraid. He finally said. I loved your mother very much, but I was always waiting for her to leave me. When the photographs appeared, they confirmed what I already expected. It was easier to believe I was right to be suspicious than to trust that I might be wrong. That does not make sense. Gabriel frowned. If you loved her, why would you expect her to leave? Because everyone I loved before her did leave. My parents. Friends. Partners. I learned early that love was not permanent. That people stayed until they found something better. And your mother was so brilliant and so beautiful that I could not believe she would stay with me forever. So you pushed her away before she could leave on her own. Yes. That is very sad. Yes. It is. Gabriel resumed walking. Walter and Marguerite fell into step beside him. Did you love her? Gabriel asked. Really love her? Not just the idea of her. I loved her more than I have ever loved anything. Before or since. Then why was trust so difficult? Because love and trust are not the same thing. Walter struggled to find words that would make sense to a 9-year-old. Love is a feeling. Trust is a choice. I had the feeling, but I could not make the choice. I kept waiting for evidence that I was right to be afraid instead of believing what your mother told me was true. Gabriel nodded slowly. That is very stupid. Yes. It was. Have you learned to trust now? I do not know. Walter considered the question honestly. I want to believe that I have changed. But I have not been tested. I have not had anyone in my life to trust since your mother left. Gabriel looked at Marguerite. Then back at Walter. Maybe you could learn. With practice. Like a skill that gets stronger the more you use it. Maybe. They walked in silence for several minutes. Past a pond where ducks were swimming. Past a group of children playing on swings. Past an elderly couple sitting together on a bench holding hands. That is what I want. Gabriel said suddenly, pointing at the elderly couple. Someone to hold hands with when I am old. Someone who stays. Walter felt something crack open inside his chest. That is what everyone wants. He managed. Did you want that with my mother? Yes. Do you still want that? The question was too direct. Too loaded with implications Walter was not prepared to address. Marguerite had gone very still beside them. I want whatever your mother is willing to give. Walter chose his words carefully. Which right now is the chance to know you. That is enough. That is more than enough. Gabriel seemed to accept this. He reached up and took Walter's hand. The gesture was unexpected and overwhelming. Walter's fingers closed around his son's smaller hand and he felt tears burning behind his eyes. Your hands are bigger than mine, Gabriel observed. But they feel the same. What do you mean? The way they hold. The pressure. My mother says you can tell a lot about people from how they hold hands. Whether they grip too tight or not tight enough. Whether they are present or distracted. How am I doing? You are holding too tight. But I understand why. You are afraid I will let go. Walter loosened his grip. Gabriel smiled. Better. They completed the circuit of the park and returned to the bench where they had started. The hour was nearly over. Marguerite had remained silent through most of the walk, but Walter could feel her watching. Evaluating. Measuring him against standards he could not see. I have to go now, Gabriel said. But can we do this again? Same time next week. If your mother agrees. Gabriel looked at Marguerite. She looked back at him for a long moment. Then she nodded once. Same time next week. Gabriel released Walter's hand. He walked to his mother and took her hand instead. They started toward the parking lot. But halfway there Gabriel turned back. Mr. Engstrom. Yes. I am glad you came. I was afraid you would not. I almost did not. Walter admitted. I was terrified of making mistakes. You will make mistakes. Gabriel's smile was wise beyond his years. Everyone does. The question is what you do afterward. What should I do afterward? You show up again. You keep trying. You prove that the mistake was not the end of the story. Walter watched them drive away. He sat on the bench for another hour after they left, watching other families, other fathers, other lives that looked effortless from the outside but were probably just as complicated as his own. His son had held his hand, had asked him to come back, had given him instructions for how to earn trust. Show up again. Keep trying. Prove that the mistake was not the end of the story. He could do that. He would do that. For as long as it took. For whatever they needed. He drove home with something unfamiliar in his chest. It took him several minutes to identify the sensation. Hope. The meetings continued. Week after week. Walter showed up early and stayed late after they left. Gabriel asked questions and offered observations and slowly began to trust the father he had never known. Marguerite watched and evaluated and gradually relaxed her vigilance. By the 6th week, Gabriel was running toward Walter when he arrived. By the 8th week, he was hugging him goodbye. By the 10th week, he was asking if they could meet somewhere other than the park. Marguerite agreed to a restaurant. Then a museum. Then a movie theater where Gabriel sat between his parents and whispered commentary about plot holes and scientific inaccuracies. They were becoming something. Not a family exactly. The wounds were still too fresh and the history too heavy for that. But something adjacent to family. Something that resembled what they might have been if Walter had made different choices a decade ago. And then the phone call came. Walter was in his office reviewing quarterly reports when his assistant interrupted. There had been an incident at Gabriel's school. A medical emergency. The boy had collapsed during gym class. His mother was in surgery and unreachable. How did they get my number? Walter asked even as he was grabbing his keys. You are listed as an emergency contact. Your assistant looked confused. In the school's records. Has been for years apparently. Someone must have added you and never removed the information. Marguerite. She had put him on the emergency contact list when Gabriel enrolled. Before the divorce. Before everything fell apart. And no one had thought to update it when she changed her name and her life and her relationship to Walter Engstrom. He reached the hospital in 14 minutes. Parked illegally. Ran through corridors asking for the pediatric wing. Found his son in a bed too large for his frame with an 4 in his arm and monitors beeping steadily. Gabriel looked up when he entered. Those grey-blue eyes widened with recognition and something else. Relief perhaps. Or hope. You came. Gabriel's voice was weak but steady. The school called. Your mother is in surgery. She could not be reached. They called you specifically. I am listed as your emergency contact. Gabriel smiled despite the obvious discomfort. My mother must have put that there before I was born. Before everything happened. Probably. Walter sat in the chair beside the bed. He reached for Gabriel's hand and the boy grasped it without hesitation. What happened? I got dizzy during gym. Then I could not see properly. Then I woke up here. Has this happened before? Sometimes I get headaches. Gabriel admitted. And sometimes I feel strange. Like the world is tilting. But I never told Mama because she worries enough already. You should have told her. I know. Gabriel's eyes were wet now. I was scared. I did not want to be sick. I did not want to be more different than I already am. Walter squeezed his hand. Being sick does not make you more different. It makes you human. Are you scared? Terrified? Good. Gabriel managed a weak smile. That means you care. They sat together in silence. Father and son. Holding hands in a hospital room while monitors beeped and nurses came and went. Can I tell you something? Gabriel said eventually. Anything. I was not sure about you at first. When we started meeting. I wanted to believe you had changed, but I also remembered what Mama said. About how you chose lies over truth. About how you were not strong enough. I know. But now I think I understand something. Gabriel's voice was thoughtful despite his obvious fatigue. You were broken. Not evil. Not bad. Just broken. And broken things can be repaired if someone gives them the right conditions and enough time. Who told you that? Mama. She says it about brains all the time. How they can rewire themselves after damage. How neural pathways find new routes when old ones are blocked. She believes it about her patients. I think she could believe it about you too. If you gave her a reason. Walter did not know what to say. His son was offering him something precious. A path forward. A possibility of redemption that extended beyond their relationship to the woman who still haunted every corner of his life. I will try. He finally managed. I will keep trying. I know. Gabriel squeezed his hand. That is why I am telling you. Because I believe you now. The door opened. Marguerite stood in the entrance. Still in surgical scrubs. Her face pale with fear. Her eyes finding Gabriel first and then moving to Walter and their joined hands. What happened? Her voice was barely controlled. How did you know to come here? The school called. I was listed as emergency contact. That is not possible. I changed all the records when we... She stopped. Understanding dawning. The records from before Gabriel was born. The information she had entered when she enrolled in prenatal classes and hospital programs, and all the systems that would eventually track their son's life. Gabriel. She moved to the bed. Her hands checking monitors and 4 lines with professional efficiency. How are you feeling? Better now. Gabriel held his mother's hand with one hand and his father's with the other. You are both here. Yes. She looked at Walter across the bed. Something shifting in her expression. We are both here. The doctor came and explained the situation. Gabriel had experienced a vasovagal episode. A temporary drop in heart rate and blood pressure that caused the fainting. Common in children his age, especially during physical exertion. Not dangerous but worth monitoring. They would keep him overnight for observation. Marguerite asked technical questions that went over Walter's head. She understood the medical details in ways he never would. But he understood other things. The fear beneath her professional demeanor. The exhaustion that showed in the lines around her eyes. The weight of being a single parent facing medical emergencies alone. I can stay. He offered when the doctor left. If you need to go back to work. If you have other obligations. I am not leaving him. I know. I am not suggesting that. I am suggesting that you do not have to do this alone. Marguerite stared at him. Whatever she saw in his face made something in her expression soften. You came when they called. Of course I came. You did not have to. You could have told them to reach someone else. You could have said it was not your responsibility. He is my son. How could I not come? The words hung in the air between them. Gabriel looked from one parent to the other with obvious interest. You said that. Gabriel observed. My son. Not my biological child. Not Gabriel. My son. Walter realized he was right. The language had shifted without his noticing. Somewhere in the weeks of park visits and restaurant dinners and movie theaters, Gabriel had stopped being an abstract concept and become something more immediate. More real. More his. I suppose I did. Marguerite sat down in the chair on the opposite side of the bed. She still held Gabriel's hand. The 3 of them formed a triangle connected by touch and tension and something that might have been the beginning of trust. You have been showing up, she said quietly. Every week. Without fail. Without excuses. I told you I would. People say many things. They do not always mean them. I meant it. Gabriel fell asleep while they were talking. The sedation from the medical evaluation pulling him under. His hands went slack in theirs, but neither parent moved away. He told me about your lectures. Marguerite said after a while. The ones you give him about history and science and everything else he asks about. He asks a lot of questions. He always has. She almost smiled. He gets that from you. Walter did not know how to respond. She was offering something. A connection between himself and their son that acknowledged his contribution. His influence. His place in the genetic lottery that had created this remarkable child. He asked me once if you were happy. Marguerite continued. Before everything happened. I told him you were the happiest I had ever been. Were you? Yes. Her voice was very quiet. I was also the saddest I have ever been. Both at the same time. Loving you was like that. Joy and pain so tangled together I could never separate them. I am sorry. I know you are. I have known for a while now. But sorry does not fix what was broken. No. It does not. They sat in silence while their son slept. The hospital noises filtered through the closed door. Pages for doctors. Footsteps in hallways. The ordinary sounds of a place where lives began and ended and everything in between. Gabriel wants us to be a family, Marguerite said eventually. He does not say it directly, but I can see it in the way he watches us together. I know. It is not that simple. I know that too. She looked at him across the bed. Her eyes were the same deep brown he remembered. The same eyes that had looked at him with love and then with devastation and then with nothing at all. Why did you believe those photographs? She asked. Really? Not the answer you gave Gabriel about fear and expectation. The real reason. Walter considered the question. He had asked himself the same thing 1,000 times. Had never found an answer that felt complete. Because I was looking for an excuse. He finally admitted. To leave before you could leave me. To protect myself from a pain I was convinced was coming. The photographs gave me permission to do what I was already planning to do. You were planning to leave me. Not consciously. Not with intention. But yes. I think part of me was always preparing for the end. And when the evidence appeared, I welcomed it. I did not question it because I did not want to question it. That is the most honest thing you have ever said to me. I know. It is also the hardest. Marguerite was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was different. Softer. Less guarded. I thought about you every day. After I left. I told myself it was anger. That I was reviewing the evidence of your betrayal. Keeping my fury fresh. But it was not just anger. What was it? Grief. For the life we should have had. For the family Gabriel should have known. For the man I thought you were before I learned who you really were. I am trying to become that man now. I know you are. And that terrifies me more than anything. Why? Because if you succeed, if you prove that you can be trusted, that you can show up, that you can be the father Gabriel deserves, then I have to reconsider everything I believed about you for the past 10 years. Would that be so terrible? Yes. She wiped at her eyes with her free hand. Because it would mean I was wrong to keep him from you. It would mean I deprived my son of a father out of anger and fear. It would mean I did the same thing you did. Chose protection over trust. Suspicion over faith. You were protecting him. I was protecting myself. She met his eyes directly. Using him as the excuse. Just like you used those photographs. The parallel was devastating. Walter had never seen it before. Marguerite's decision to hide Gabriel was a mirror of his decision to believe the lies. Both of them choosing comfortable certainty over terrifying vulnerability. Both of them sacrificing their family on the altar of self-protection. We are quite a pair. He said quietly. We are disasters. She agreed. Complete and total disasters. But Gabriel is not. No. Something in her expression shifted. He is the best thing either of us ever did. The only good thing to come out of our wreckage. Then maybe we owe it to him to try. Try what? To be better. To do what he suggested. Show up. Keep trying. Prove that the mistakes were not the end of the story. Marguerite looked at their sleeping son. Then back at Walter. I do not know if I can forgive you, she said. I do not know if I can trust you again. But I am willing to try. If that makes any sense. It makes perfect sense. This will not be easy. I know. You will have to earn everything. Every moment. Every privilege. I will not give you anything you have not worked for. I would not want you to. She almost smiled. Then something beeped on one of the monitors and she was on her feet checking readings and adjusting settings and being the doctor she had trained herself to become. Walter watched her work. She was still the most competent person he had ever known. Still brilliant and beautiful and capable of anything. But she was also tired. Worn down by years of doing everything alone. Carrying weights that should have been shared. Let me help, he said when she returned to her seat. Help with what? With everything. With Gabriel. With the practical things. The impossible hours. The constant juggling. I have resources and time and the willingness to learn. Let me carry some of the weight. Marguerite studied him for a long moment. Whatever she saw in his face made her nod once. We will see. But maybe. Eventually. If you prove that you can be trusted. I will prove it. I hope so. She looked at Gabriel again. For his sake. For all our sakes. They stayed through the night, taking turns dozing in the uncomfortable hospital chairs, holding Gabriel's hands when he stirred, talking in whispered conversations that covered neutral topics and slowly moved toward more dangerous territory. By morning Gabriel was awake and demanding breakfast and asking when he could go home. The doctors cleared him for discharge. Marguerite handled the paperwork. Walter handled the logistics. They walked out of the hospital together. A family in formation if not in name. Same time next Saturday. Gabriel asked as they reached the parking lot. Same time next Saturday. Walter confirmed. But maybe somewhere different. Gabriel looked between his parents. Maybe somewhere more interesting than the park. We will see. Marguerite said. Gabriel hugged Walter goodbye. The embrace lasted longer than usual. Tighter. More deliberate. Thank you for coming. Gabriel whispered. For not making me be alone. I will always come. Walter whispered back. Whatever you need. Whenever you call. I will always be there. He watched them drive away. Then he stood in the hospital parking lot and looked at the building where his son had spent the night. Where Marguerite had sat beside him in the darkness. Where something had shifted between all of them. Not forgiveness. Not reconciliation. But the beginning of something. A chance. Gabriel had asked him if he believed in justice. He had said he was not sure. That good people suffered while terrible people prospered. But maybe justice was not something the universe provided. Maybe justice was something you built yourself. Choice by choice. Action by action. Year by year until the scales began to balance. He had spent 10 years paying for a mistake he made in a single night. Marguerite had spent 10 years surviving that mistake. Gabriel had spent 10 years growing up in the shadow of it. Now they were all trying something different. Something harder. Something that required more courage than any of them had ever shown. Walter got in his car and drove toward a future that looked different than any future he had imagined. Not better necessarily. Not easier. But more real. More honest. More worth fighting for. Some broken things could not be fixed. Marguerite had told him that a decade ago and she had been right. But maybe broken things could be rebuilt. Into something new. Something different. Something that carried the cracks but did not crumble beneath them. He would show up next Saturday. And the Saturday after that. And every Saturday for as long as they would have him. Because Gabriel had taught him something important. The question was not whether you made mistakes. Everyone made mistakes. The question was what you did afterward. Walter intended to spend the rest of his life answering that question. One Saturday at a time. One conversation at a time. One small proof of trustworthiness at a time. Until the family he had destroyed became the family he had earned. It would take years. It would take patience he had never possessed. It would take becoming someone he had never been. But Gabriel had his eyes. And Marguerite had finally looked at him without hatred. And the morning sun was bright with possibility. That was enough. For now. For today. For the beginning of whatever came next. It was enough.